Hello, and thank you for joining us to kick off Network's 50th anniversary celebrations. 50 years ago, on this day, December 17th, more than 40 sisters gathered here at Trinity University for a weekend of meetings, and by the end of it, they had decided to start a new organization that would lobby for Catholic social justice. Tonight, you'll hear from some of Network's foundresses, and I am so grateful to them for speaking to us tonight. I also want to honor the Network foundresses who are no longer living and express our deep gratitude for their contributions, which helped Network become a reality. So now, without further ado, let's take a deep dive into Network's history with a new short video, In the Room, Building the Power of Participation. Before the 1960s, women religious in this country were primarily associated with institutional settings, such as schools, hospitals, or parishes. But the world was changing. The spirit was moving. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the peace movement were in full swing. And the church was also moving. Pope John XXIII convened the Second Vatican Council to examine the relationship between the church and the modern world. A few years later, as religious congregations lived into the changes that emerged from Vatican II, Dominican Sister Marjorie Tuitt, Mercy Sister Mary Riley, St. Joseph Sister Claire Dugan, and Monsignor Gino Baroni, the godfather of USCCB's Campaign for Human Development, they hatched the idea to gather sisters to explore a Catholic political ministry in the United States. Out of that gathering, Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice was born, and some of Network's founding sisters are here to help us tell the story.
As I understood it, coming out of the SECA meeting, 15 sisters would be coming to this meeting, but through lots of phone contact, instead of 15, 47 showed up.
I was invited by the Sisters Council of the Davenport Diocese here in Iowa to attend a gathering of sisters who are meeting on justice issues in Washington, D.C. in 1971.
Anyhow, 47 showed up. And among that 47 were two major superiors, which at those days really gave it a great emphasis. It was a sense of something new, something about justice. And I was interested.
Well, I think there was a sense of excitement because it was like, in a sense, sort of pushing the parameters of what we had traditionally done.
In this country, sisters were ready to address the critical issues of militarism and racism, and every other, and poverty, of course, which undergirded both.
When the sisters gathered here at Trinity, the church had 80 years of Catholic social teaching under its belt, starting with Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo XIII's 1891 encyclical. Earlier that same year, in 1971, Pope Paul VI's apostolic letter, generally known as a call to action, and the World Synod of Bishops' statement, Justice in the World, were released. These documents gave the sisters the grounding they needed to establish Network as a Catholic social justice lobby and would sustain the Network community in the years to come.
The document, Justice in the World, was published just a few months before the gathering at Trinity that founded Network. And I can speak personally about its impact, and I don't want to presume to speak about others, but I have a strong sense that the the force of that document and its impact on me had an impact on sisters, not just sisters, but anyone who was concerned about the social teaching of the church. And what I remember, and what I more than remember, what I paraphrase is, action on behalf of justice is a constituent of the gospel.
Pope Paul VI, who really was the great social justice pope, he had recently, before our meeting, issued a letter entitled A Call to Action. And in it, he discussed social justice in the terms of Catholics, all peoples, but particularly Catholics must get into the places of power where the economic and political systems are being shaped, especially on behalf of the poor. And he urged us to be politically active, saying, politics is a demanding way to live out the Christian message of service to others.
But I trip over networks, message and work every time I read the daily scriptures, because it's so clear that we have to be allied with the poor, with the outcasts, with the people on the fringes. We really are called to turn the world upside down.
Committed to having a voice in Washington, D.C. to work for justice, the Sisters opened Network in a borrowed office on a budget of $185 in April 1972. By the summer, they were holding workshops to educate attendees on how to engage in politics, always centering human dignity and the common good. Soon thereafter, Network developed state coordinators, most often sisters, to educate sisters and their collaborators on policy issues and to train them to be advocates in the field. Network was, and still is, a small presence among the advocates on Capitol Hill, most of whom are well-funded K Street lobbyists.
There was no voice for the poor, no voice for justice issues in general, for working people. So that became our mantra, was the importance of having a presence on the Hill to lobby for the issues that were pertinent to the poor, to those who were unheard, had no voice.
I felt that if we formed a group that would lobby our representatives and senators, then perhaps it would counteract the influence that the rich and the powerful lobby groups were having on them.
Well, the very first meeting, when we met at Trinity, there were sisters from a lot of different congregations, and the enthusiasm was kind of palpable. And so when we set up, a steering committee, again, we had representatives from several congregations, and we, as we started to think about how to get it going, it was very collaborative.
By the spring of 1972, Carol had assembled her staff, and that staff was just marvelous, and they pulled it off.
And we went down each summer to learn the issues that we as adopted we would pursue. You can't take every issue. And also to learn how to lobby. And that, I think there I met Joe Biden and Ted Kennedy and others who came over and taught us. You got a sense of the Hill. You got a sense of the Capitol. You got a sense, that itself was an experience, that this was our place.
I think it's still possible that if we really became united And we could be a dangerous force. We could really affect change and change the world.
We cannot be indifferent to politics. Our politics need to be centered on human dignity and the common good. When politics is grounded in love and real encounters with people in the greatest need, it is a sacred vocation. And as Pope Francis said, one of the highest forms of charity. The sisters who founded Network 50 years ago knew this, and they took action to create an organization that today still educates, organizes, and lobbies for justice.
Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come celebrate the 50th year of the founding of Network. My name is Mara Rutten, and I'm Network's historian. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you some of our foundresses. Over the last few weeks, we have had the pleasure of conversing with some of these women, and then last week, we let them have a chance to talk to each other. Please enjoy listening to them tell you their story in their own words. And thank you again for supporting Network these past 50 years. Thank you all for being here. I hope that this time is going to be really fun for us reminiscing. But I'd like to start out by asking you to remember back to that meeting in 1971. Because after 50 years, not everyone can be with us. So first, we'd like you to reflect on some of the other sisters who aren't here today, like Marjorie Tuitt or Audrey Miller. What is it that you can remember?
My recollection of that first meeting is, as we said, Monsignor Baroni was kind of co-chairing it, or really almost being in charge. But at some point, Marge continued the dialogue with him, and you could almost see the change that was going to occur. She was really an activist nun, and that was great to see. And I remember the moment. I don't remember what was said, but we all agreed that we women could be our own leaders. And he graciously stepped aside. And from that moment on, then Marge was kind of coordinating us. I also would like to say she did such an excellent job, because we women didn't all agree either. I remember correctly that when we broke up into little discussion groups, because we were all very involved and really wanted our voice to be heard.
Picking up on that, Marilyn, the final day when it was all coming together, we're in one big group, and Gino and Jerry were at the front of the room and pulling it together, etc. And Audrey Miller broke it up by claiming that really there was something wrong with the two men, nothing personal, in the front of the room as we're having this. And Gino graciously and immediately said, well, okay, take over your meeting. And he sort of summoned, but she was halfway there. Audrey came up to the front of the room, and she presided with us for the final session. And that moment with Gino saying, okay, you're right, come up. And the woman being up there in the circle, really, as you mentioned, set the tone for moving forward, bonding as the sisters or the women's organization. And at that time, we were discussing names, and someone said Sisters Network or something. We said, no, just Network, because who knows where it's going to take us as far as people joining in the effort.
Do you remember this letter? Some of you, I think, received it, and some maybe did not. Can you read it?
pretty well.
This was the letter from Jerry Ernst.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
The invitation for the. How many of you actually received that letter?
Well, I didn't receive it, but Kathy Gannon, with whom I lived, did. And so that's how I wiggled an invitation to come to the first meeting.
Yeah. I didn't receive it. I'm sure somebody on the Sisters Council probably did.
Yes, one of the things we find interesting is that Monsignor Baroni felt that the sisters were able to network and organize better than the men had been doing. And one proof of that is that a lot of people ended up coming to the meeting, because the word spread like wildfire. So I think many of you received word of the meeting through other means besides the letter, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I remember is that Kathy Gannon, we went together because she was the one that was invited, and it was snowing. And I remember we walked all around the perimeter to try to find a door that would let us in. So that was a major accomplishment. When the woman picked us up at the airport, Kathy was in charge of, I don't know, something Catholic she was like the diocesan director of something or other. And so the woman that picked us up was also a diocesan head of something. And anyway, she was just furious. She said, I can't believe it. She said, here we are in the middle of the Vietnam War and all of the things about civil rights and so on. And she said, what are the bishops doing?
What inspired you about being together?
Today?
Back then, but actually today is also an interesting question. What inspires you today?
Well, I think what inspired me was that so many of the women had been activists, some of them from Latin America and some of them from the United States, that they were involved in the civil rights struggle and so on. So it was like being with a group of people who supported some of your basic instincts, and that they were doing those things and having a good time.
Today, hearing your reminiscence of the event and my memory of the event itself, it was powerful for its truth. That's what struck me, I think, is carried with me.
What I remember is that there was a sense of urgency in the room, although I'm not sure we knew what would become of that. But I definitely felt that on Friday night.
Probably I was one of the youngest members that came, and I just felt like I was in the presence of some really prophetic women of wisdom, who could sense the real mission of what we were about as religious, and the effect that we could have on our representatives and senators.
I had somewhat the same feeling, Angela, that such a diversity of women, not only religious congregations, but all the injustice areas that they were involved in. And yet we could come together, we could dialogue. We wanted to do more, and we knew that we had to do more. So Mary, going back to your word urgency, that also was something I took away from. And we had to do it, whether we did it there as a group or when we went back. We had to do more. We had to be in the public arena. And it was truly a blessing. And I suppose it was an inspiration for all of us, and also especially for myself as I move forward. Women can do it. Women religious can do it. But we do have to work together.
One thing, just building on what has been said, 50 years, I've been parts of groups that started out with ardor and passion and fizzled. I think what's so critical about network is what happened in those first 3 or 4 or 5 years, when the organization took root. And who knew at the time that those roots would last for 50 years and beyond?
I think for the first time, I said to myself, no one gives up power. So we have to take it. And in the context of network, it was such a collaborative and, as everybody has mentioned, sense of belonging to the group, the sisters.
What does political ministry mean to you?
Well, I keep coming back to the impact of that line in Justice in the World. Action on behalf of justice is a constituent of the gospel.
Right.
And I think that very simple sentence is very integrating.
Well, for me, it's another layer of responsibility that the common good of the whole community, but that so many of the pieces have to be done in a political way, so that the ministry is pretty all-encompassing about what's happening in our political system. And it's a big agenda, but that's why I say if we focus, it's better. But I do think that telling the truth, when we did the voting records and things like that, it established a reputation for being truthful. And I think that's an important part, to hang on to.
I heard the expression that advocacy was making private pain a public issue. And what little success in the terms of what is success that I think many of us have had is when we take the stories. Somebody mentioned let's operate locally and statewide more. The stories that we know, and out of those stories of injustice, lack of truth, etc., when we tell the stories, no one can deny the reality of that. And politics is timing, and unfortunately, it's a lot of money if we're looking at electoral parts. But when we do come out of the authenticity of people's experiences and their pain or their possibilities, that's when we can bring about change.
It's really important to be as apolitical as we possibly can too, though, and nonpartisan. It's so easy to go with, the Democrats, because the Democrats are the ones that are interested in social justice, but truth's everywhere, and justice is on the other side. I think we really have to work hard to find truth where it is, but not label it or not think of it. I have a tendency to think right or think left, and I think, no, I don't want to go that way. And preaching and thinking and living the gospel for its truth that's so hard to understand. I have a hard time with the gospel. But I think, we've got to do things that just don't divide.
What would you say to network advocates who are trying to interpret the signs of the times today?
Be persistence. So I would just encourage the followers of network to keep contacting their representatives and senators, and maybe someday we'll make a dent, and encourage people, to vote, and let's try to work together to affect the common good. I think we just have to keep stressing that we're here to, to make this world a better place, and to try to vote in people that will bring about the change needed.
Well, one thing I would recommend is that to have a focus. I think that one of the things that we dealt with at the beginning of Network was that there were like about 18 issues that, we were left supposedly to work on. And so it's to have a focus is somehow, I think, a better way to approach because, you just can't go on all of these. And I remember John, who founded Common Cause, he said the problem with liberals is that they have random indignation. And so when you think about, the list of issues that we were left with, to work on was just fairly unmanageable. So it was nice to have a thing that you could feel like you had made a difference because it was a focused.
I think we have to begin. I mean, we're too old to do that now ourselves. With younger people, and to bring to them, make them aware of the issues that affect their lives.
I hope that Network continues, to be a voice that people trust. And that's what Network has been all these many years. Network does its work, does its homework, and it does take on issues that some people do not want to tackle. But my wish and my desire is that Network will always be that organization that people can go to find the truth, and because it's well respected today, the organization.
Thank you again for joining us this evening as we honor our past and move boldly into the future. Our celebrations will continue in the coming months with virtual and in-person gatherings. Stay tuned for more information.